Adaora remembered when life with Tunde felt like a well-rehearsed duet. They were in sync, light-hearted equal partners. He had a thriving job at a tech firm, and she worked in project management. Evenings were their shared space, their rhythm, their joy. She would cook while he chopped onions, or they would clean together while laughing over something trivial. If she was late at work, Tunde would straighten the house before she got back. Nothing felt like a duty. They simply flowed. Tunde would sometimes call her from work. "Do you want umla or jollof tonight?" Adaora would giggle, "Surprise me." And when she got home, a meal would be ready, the table set, soft music playing. They were best friends, truly. When he had tight deadlines, Adaora didn't hesitate to help. She'd stay up editing presentations, printing reports, even driving across town for meetings he couldn't attend. And he appreciated it. "You're my blessing," he'd often say, pulling her into a hug. They dreamed together. Joint savings, vacation plans, children one day. There was mutual admiration and peace. But life, as it often does, decided to test their foundation. And the test began with a single phone call that changed everything. Tunde had lost his job. At first, Adaora tried to remain positive. When Tunde broke the news, she held his hand and said softly, "It's okay, love. This is just a bend, not the end." He nodded, but the tension in his shoulders told another story. "It's just unexpected," he said, staring out the window. They said they were downsizing, restructuring. All the usual crap. Adaora sat beside him on the couch, rubbing his back. "You're smart. You'll bounce back. We'll figure this out together." In the following days, Tunde withdrew into himself. He spent hours on his laptop applying for jobs. Adaora didn't push. Instead, she handled things quietly. She increased her work hours, made sure the bills were paid, and let him breathe. Then something unexpected happened. Adaora was promoted. Her salary doubled overnight. When she told Tunde, she was beaming. "Babe, guess what? They promoted me to senior lead." I didn't see it coming. But Tunde only managed a tight smile. "That's good news," he muttered, eyes fixed on the television. Adaora's heart dropped a little. She reached out, touching his hand. "We'll be fine. You'll get something soon, and we'll go back to normal." He nodded but didn't meet her eyes. She kept hoping things would go back to the way they were. But the air between them started to feel different. Heavier. Adaora came home one evening and said cheerfully, "Let's cook together like old times." But Tunde stood up abruptly. "Do I look like your houseboy now?" he snapped. "Is it because I lost my job? You think you can order me around?" Adaora froze. "Tunde, what? That's not what I meant. I just miss us, that's all." His words cut deeper than he realized. Adaora stood in silence for a moment. "You used to help me before, when you had a job. It wasn't about status then. Why is it different now?" But he had already walked away. After that night, the warmth in their home began to fade. Tunde became cold and distant, always on edge. He barely spoke during meals. Conversations turned into complaints. He accused her of trying to dominate him, of becoming too proud. One evening, after yet another argument, he muttered under his breath, "So now that you're earning more, you feel like the man of the house, right?" Adaora stared at him, hurt and confused. "What happened to us, Tunde?" she whispered. Tunde didn't answer her that night. He just picked up his phone and walked into the guest room. It had become his new habit, retreating. Adaora sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty hallway, wondering how they got here. She tried talking to him again the next morning. "Tunde, please. Can we talk without fighting?" He looked at her as if she were a stranger. "What do you want me to say, Adaora? That I enjoy sitting at home jobless while my wife feeds me?" "That's not what I'm saying," she said gently. "I just want us to stop hurting each other. We used to be a team." He scoffed. "That was before you started acting like the boss." She blinked, stunned. "I've never tried to be the boss. I've only been trying to survive, for both of us." But his heart had already shifted. He stopped helping with anything around the house. Dishes piled up. The trash sat by the door. He would walk past everything, shoulders stiff with resentment. Adaora said nothing. She just did it all silently. Then one day, she came home from work to find him sitting with his sister and their cousin in the living room. As she entered, the conversation stopped abruptly. His sister greeted her with a cold smile. "Good evening, Adaora." Tunde leaned back on the couch, arms folded. "We were just talking about how respect is slowly disappearing in marriages these days," he said. His cousin chuckled. "Especially when the woman begins to earn more than the man. That's when wala starts." Adaora stood still, swallowing her words. She forced a smile. "I'll be in the kitchen." She could feel their eyes on her as she walked away. Judging, mocking. She had become the silent villain in a story she didn't even know was being told. That night, Tunde came to her in the kitchen. "I told them what's been happening." "Had to. They said I should talk to your family too. So everyone understands that this marriage is no longer balanced." Adaora wiped her hands slowly. "You told them?" she asked softly. "You invited people into our home to discuss our private issues? Without me?" He shrugged. "You left me no choice." She felt something inside her crack. The pain wasn't just in his words. It was in how he no longer saw her as a partner. The following weekend, her mother called. "Adaora, what is this I'm hearing? Your husband is complaining that you no longer respect him." Adaora sighed. "Mummy, I haven't disrespected him. He's the one who's changed. I'm only doing what I must to keep us going." Her mother's voice turned stern. "Listen to me, Adaora. Just because there's been a shift in who provides doesn't mean you should forget your place. He's still the head of the house. A man needs to feel respected, especially when times are hard." Adaora closed her eyes, trying to contain the heat rising in her chest. "But I haven't disrespected him, Mummy. Everything I've asked him to do is what he used to do before. Why is it suddenly disrespectful now?" The line went quiet for a second, then her mother replied. "Because things have changed. He's hurting, Adaora. You have to be the bigger person. Don't bruise his ego further." That was the moment Adaora realized. Everyone expected her to shrink. And shrink she did. For weeks she said less, asked for less. She stopped inviting him into conversations and decisions. She bore everything, bills, chores, emotional strain without complaining. But the silence only widened the gap between them. Then, during a family gathering, one of Tunde's uncles pulled her aside. "Adaora," he said quietly, "you must understand that you can't be the head of the home. That role belongs to your husband no matter your income. Let him lead, even if it's just in name." She looked at the older man, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean by, even if it's just in name? Should I pretend to be smaller just to keep the peace?" He gave a sad smile. "Sometimes peace is better than pride." Later that evening, back home, she stared at the ceiling long after Tunde had gone to bed. Her thoughts were loud, her chest heavy. She whispered to herself, "What exactly am I doing wrong? Why do I have to break myself to prove I'm still a wife?" The next morning something snapped. She stood at the foot of the bed, staring at him as he scrolled through his phone. "Tunde," she said calmly, "if being the head of the house is this important to you, fine. I won't fight you anymore." He looked up surprised. "What's that supposed to mean?" She folded her arms. "It means I'm stepping back. I won't provide anymore. I won't pay the bills. I won't do both roles. From now on, you lead, you provide, you decide." He scoffed. "So that's your plan? To punish me?" She didn't flinch. "No, Tunde. This isn't punishment. This is clarity. I'm tired of being blamed for saving a sinking ship while everyone pretends it's still sailing smoothly." True to her word, Adaora stopped everything. She no longer transferred money for groceries, didn't pay the electricity bill, and ignored the landlord's rent reminder. She came home, cooked small meals for herself, and kept her silence. Tunde began to notice. "There's no rice in the house," he said one evening. She looked up from her book. "Oh, I thought the head of the house was in charge now. He glared at her. Is this a joke to you? No, she replied coolly. It's just that I needed to understand my role. So now I do. I'm the wife, not the husband. I'm not dragging titles anymore. He threw his hands up and walked out of the room, slamming the door. Days passed with tension hanging in the air. The fridge emptied. The generator ran out of fuel. The gas finished. Tunde didn't replace any of it. He waited. Maybe he expected her to cave in. He didn't. Eventually, on a Saturday afternoon, he confronted her. Is this how you want to live? In a house with no food, no light, just stubborn silence. She looked him straight in the eyes. Is this how you wanted to lead? With pride and resentment. The argument spiraled again. Voices rose. Words flew like knives. Then, suddenly, she stopped mid-sentence. You know what? She said quietly. I'm done shouting. I'm done explaining myself to someone who refuses to see that I never stopped loving you. He stood there, silent. For a second it seemed like he might say something kind. Instead he muttered, You've changed. She smiled sadly. Yes, and so have you. The only difference is, I changed to survive. You changed to punish. That night she sat alone on the balcony. The air was still, the stars above indifferent. She picked up her phone and messaged an old friend who worked in recruitment. Any job openings for someone like Tunde? She typed, her fingers trembling. A few days later her friend replied. There's something. Mid-level pays okay. He'd need to interview this week. Adaora thanked her. That evening she handed the job details to Tunde. I found you something, she said, sliding the paper toward him. He stared at it, silent. Then looked at her. You still want to help me? After everything? She nodded. It's not about help anymore. It's about restoring peace. For both of us. He took the paper but said nothing else. Tunde went for the interview. He got the job. It wasn't as prestigious as his former role, and the pay wasn't as high as Adaora's, but it was something. Start. He came home that day and simply said, I got it. Adaora nodded with a small smile. Congratulations. There were no hugs, no celebration. Just a quiet acknowledgement. Something had shifted too far between them to pretend everything was fine. Days turned into weeks. Tunde started going to work again, but he no longer laughed like before. He ate silently. He barely looked at her. Even the way he placed his keys on the table was distant, like a stranger visiting. Adaora tried to start small conversations. How was work? She'd ask in the evenings. Fine. He'd reply without looking up. That was it. One word. Sometimes two. The warmth had gone. One night, she sat beside him on the couch. Do you resent me, Tunde? She asked. He kept his eyes on the TV. I don't know, he murmured. Maybe I resent myself. She nodded slowly. I never wanted to replace you. I just wanted us to survive. I wanted us to stay together. He looked at her for a long moment but said nothing. Silence wrapped around them like fog. He began sleeping on the couch again. When she brought it up, he shrugged. It's more comfortable here. She didn't argue. She was too tired. Tired of chasing something that didn't want to be caught. Her friends started asking, Are you okay? And she'd smile and say, We're managing. But inside she was lonely. More lonely than she'd ever been. Even though he was right there under the same roof. One afternoon at work, her colleague Nina said, You always look so composed. But your eyes, they look tired. Adaora smiled faintly. That's what holding everything together looks like. Later that week, Tunde mentioned casually. They might promote me soon. Management says I've been doing well. Adaora smiled politely. That's good news. But deep inside something had frozen. Her joy no longer reached him. In bed that night, she stared at the ceiling again. How did we become this? She whispered. Two people who used to laugh and dream. Now walking on eggshells in silence. Tunde stirred beside her. Maybe too much changed, he muttered. Maybe you became too strong. She turned to him. And you couldn't handle that. He didn't answer. There it was, the truth. Not in what he said, but in what he couldn't say. She had risen. She had fought for them. And he had mistaken her strength for a challenge. Despite everything, Adaora didn't quit her job. She didn't step down just to make her husband feel taller. Because the truth was, she had earned her place. And she would no longer shrink just to soothe someone else's fear. They lived on, under one roof, in a quiet coexistence. Not quite enemies, not quite partners. Just two people, once full of laughter, now surviving on memory. And Adaora, though heartbroken, remained steady. Because strength, she'd learned, wasn't about shouting. It was about standing tall, even when standing alone.